Hi, Wendy here. I wanted to share with you some thoughts. Um, Partly because my spirit guides were wanting me to, and they're like, "Hey, this would be a good thing to kind of share on video." So here I am. Partly it's something that I'm going through right now, and so I feel like in that way, it's always good to just kind of show up and be vulnerable. And the best lessons are that are taught are the ones that we actually are moving through, like you know who wants a teacher that has never done what it is that they're teaching, right? So, in that way, here we go. It's kind of about masculinity and femininity and men and women, um, and part of this is channeled, right? So some of this is our messages from the other side, things that they've shared with me about our expansion. We're part of this great shift that's happening on the planet. It does have something to do with gender. And part of that, the expansion of gender, and we can see it now, so many people are like transgendered and um, bisexual or gay, lesbian, or gay. And obviously there's even more things, right? So in that way, where you can see it. That's the evidence to say, yes, there is a shift that's happening in regards to gender. Um, and what they're kind of explaining to me is that because we're all one, right? We all can identify with whatever it is that we desire, right? We can identify, especially as we become more conscious and aware. Like, I remember many lives being a man. I remember many lives being a woman. I remember many lives being so many different races. So when you start to cultivate an awareness within yourself, you're going to start having an awareness of those things too, right? So that's definitely part of this awakening. And I feel like our collective consciousness at one point will kind of hold all of that. So when you are all things, who are you choosing to be today, right? What do you identify with? Identity, right? Part of my journey, this life for me, has been um, remembering a male experience. I grew up in a very male dominated reality where women um, were weaker, I guess. And that was the environment. Women were less than, and I have a bunch of sisters, and I'm obviously a female. Um, to survive that reality, I chose to kind of disengage with me as a female. I wanted to be a boy and I wanted to be like the boys. And I learned because I'm so intuitive, right? I knew exactly what to say it, how to be, how to walk, how to talk. Like, I was able to mimic the behaviors and energy signature of boys. Disowning or disassociating with my own feminine parts because that's how I had to survive. I didn't want to be scapegoated like some of my other sisters. They were scapegoated, right? They were picked on and just kind of bullied for just being a girl, just being who they were. And with that, I disassociated from my emotions because crying was weak, right? And all of these things. And so it's taken me years and years to unravel who I am, my identity, reconnecting with my emotional self. And there's a lot of things that I've learned on that journey, the importance of those things, right? How we're not meant to compartmentalize ourselves, right? And so part of this conversation for me today is about kind of owning that, expressing that, and talking about, you know, these parts of ourselves. There is going to come a time when we're not separate, like we're so separate still in our culture, right? We're separate with race, we're separate with gender for sure, not recognizing the unity of it all, not recognizing, and I firsthand, because of my memories too of my past lives, it's like I know what it's like to be a boy or a man to a certain degree, right? I know what it's like to be a female, obviously, and I chose to be a female this life. And so within that expression, in holding and, the lessons of the wounded feminine, right? And the wounded masculine, and had such a bullying kind of experience from the get go, um, of a hierarchy of boys were better, right? Boys were better at sports. Boys were just better. Everyone wanted a boy, and I know that's a race thing too. I know in a lot of cultures, boys are revered. So it's like a real old school way of thinking. And I say old school because it's like hundreds of years, you wanted to have a boy be born, right? That was, and I don't even know why, if we really thought about it, like why that is. What I'm saying is how ingrained it is in our thinking and what that really does to a girl. I don't care what your race is, which means how we think doesn't matter as much. How we feel definitely doesn't matter. And I know that is a very physical expression of the wound. And what I mean is, like culturally or collectively, if this is a wound or an imbalance, and it's an expression of this overall, like if we're part of a big cell, right? And the cell is functioning where it's attacking the females primarily, right? And let's just even say the females are an energetic force, or you can even give it applied a number. Femininity is a 7, and then or whatever, and the males within this cell are a 10, right? And are yellow, and the females are green, right? It's the cell is representing, and then this behavior of this yellow trying to take over the green, right? Not recognizing that green is made up of yellow, right? I It's a really complex thing. And I'm kind of oversimplifying some of these things, but it came up for me because of some of the energetic lessons that I'm holding this lifetime is this gender rules, sexuality, um, feminine versus masculinity. And my guides were saying that there's going to come a point where we're recognizing that there's no fight. It's not now the females need to dominate over the males, right? Or the blacks have to dominate over the whites, and the whites have to, you know, I feel like we need to stop fighting. We have to stop fighting. We have to recognize that we're all a part of the same, right? And I feel like as our awareness increases, we're going to become more aware that we are all, right? And when you break it down on a more of a micro scale, so that's like macro, like men versus women. But then if you do it more on a micro scale and you talk to the individuals, you talk to your brother, you talk to your father, they're just as feminine, right? As you are in some ways, if we're going to denote certain characteristics as being feminine. And that's what's kind of weird too, right? It's like we kind of have these definitions of what a gender is, like what a female is. And then we categorize them and limit it. And same thing with males, right? What masculine energy is and what female energy is. It's all kind of silly because we're trying to use language to describe an energy that we fully don't understand. Because if it was in balance, it actually would start changing form. What I mean is like as we integrate all of these parts, the feminine will change and the masculine will change because it'll become more integral parts of the system. It'll become more of a balanced. So it almost like we see masculinity in its extreme because it has absence of the feminine energy, and then we see feminine in the extreme when it has no masculinity, right? But our idea is to live in balance, is to live wholly, right? And there's many studies done on how to integrate, like a lot of spiritualities, a lot of religions talk about this. More of like the natives and the Eastern cultures talk about this masculinity, what it is, the femininity, what it is in Native American cultures. And for me, that's part of the addition of the message that they wanted me to kind of portray is like we need to step aside from the definitions that we've given things. We need to have a clean slate and allow people to express themselves how they need to express. Part of this video's function is to kind of get you to think about where might you have your own biases with gender. You know, I as a teacher, I taught so many years painting, and I have taught thousands and thousands of people painting, right? Because I would do those, I teach 30 people at a time. And it was interesting to me because there was always women that would prefer male teachers. And which is so fascinating to me. And it just tells me about their journey, right? And what they prefer or whatever. And you're allowed to have it however you want to. But what I want you to start thinking about is like how that is so ingrained in our culture. The authority, right? The authority is male. So even how we hear information, right? It's at a certain frequency. And if you're male or masculine, right, you're able to deliver information because your energy force, it has a certain frequency to it, able to send it out, right? And and I just want you to think about this because I've witnessed it so many times where a woman will say a sentence or a fact, right? And the man will say the same fact, but there's more of a response with that male saying it. And to me, that just denotes this imbalance, right? Now, some of you might say, well, I just prefer that. But I'm really curious if that truly is true or if it's just what we're used to. That's what we associate with authority. Makes us feel safe. It's what we know. You know, how do we really feel about female leaders? Do we feel like they need to be like a man and behave like that, right? But now they're just feminine? Or are we allowed to do things our own way? You know, traditionally, untraditionally. And I feel like this is a conversation that's just beginning, but it needs to be discussed. We need to think about these things. I sh- I have to process how that looks like for myself internally. And then even go more microscopically, go within myself. It's like there's so many parts of myself that like to diminish and bully the softer spoken parts of myself, the feeling parts of myself. So when you put all of these things together, we just need to start changing the story. We need to stop seeing men as just men, right? Because it can go both ways, and women as women, and just start seeing strength for strength and love for love and kindness for kindness. And really allow people to be who they are. It's like we're missing the treasures that are given to us. Just how even throughout time, spirit has come to us in many stories as a homeless person, just showing us that our trained way of thinking is off, just to shift us. Nope, you need to find it in not the king, but the homeless person, right? Like God's going to be disguised as a homeless person. Because there we like, wow, we're really missing it. We're really, really trusting our brains instead of our hearts. We're seeing through that lens, right? So again, I'm just calling it out to kind of tame it and to kind of help shift it even more. Where do you might do this? Do you have a hard time with a woman in power, with power? Think about who, just think about that. Because truly, whenever we have limits for any human being, whether it's male or female, are just limits we're putting on ourselves. So, in that way, spirit is like, please stop doing this to yourself. It's so limiting and unnecessary. It's like seeing through the eyes of a child. A child doesn't know race, right? Child doesn't even know male versus female. It just knows love, right? And it knows itself, so it knows when somebody's speaking and resonating at that frequency because they're close to source, right? So things to ponder. And I would love and encourage everyone to be a part of this new change where it's not about gender, it's not about fighting. It's interesting how so much is shifting on the planet where we even have to teach differently. It's so much more poignant when we get to share um, our own personal journeys, because that's what this shift on the planet is about. It's about being authentic and vulnerable. And, I do feel there is a misunderstanding, and not even a misunderstanding, but we can see the wound within our culture when somebody shows up authentically, or even when they're going through something, how we respond to that, right? Like we want teachers, even in this line of work, to almost have this idealistic presence, right? Like they're not allowed to make mistakes, or they're not allowed to have a negative thought, or they need to have all of the answers, right? But truly, we are energetic forms that are constantly growing and expanding, which means we're learning. So it's always going to be a little messy, always. So I feel like it's an expression of our youngness and our approach in our perspective, and how the lens in which we're looking at the world. And in this way, this is where I feel like we're changing and we need to change. And so I'm going to challenge all of us, including myself, to allow for this change to happen, right? where we show up authentically and not have the answers, let's say, even, right? Or we know confidently. Because some of the things that I'm going through right now is the issue of masculine energy and feminine energy. I grew up in a reality where men were deemed better than women. And this is just my experience, okay? And I don't feel like that's true, but it's taken a long time to unravel some of those things. And I don't blame the men and I don't blame the women. I've taken responsibility that these are parts of my own growth. But there's so many nuances to it. It's such a complicated processes of unraveling, especially when it's reinforced in our culture in lots of ways. And I feel like as we move through these things together, whether you're a man or a female, we have to process these things. What does it look like? What does it feel like, when we're moving through this healing process? It's really a balancing process. We have to come more in balance. You know, Growing up as a female in a very male dominated reality, it was verbally spoken. Women were just weaker. So I learned to try not to be a girl. Like I embodied being a boy. I wanted to be a boy because who would want to be the weaker sex? Who would want to be weak at all, really? Parts of my lessons as parts of my soul growth, right? Power and control, ego. And so disassociating from my own gender truly, and I have I've come a long way. But within that, what I was kind of called to share today, and my guides are really wanting me to share, was what that really looks like for me or an individual. And because they said people will be able to relate. So here we go. It's, I'm such a great doer. Like I have so much energy. I could do anything and clean. I can push myself, right? And this isn't about a sex, right? This is just about my process. I really am very comfortable in the doing space. I don't understand the being space as much. And so I have to cultivate that. And I don't mean meditating and doing yoga, though I do those things. The feminine space, I don't even feel like we embody it yet fully. And I mean, even the women that are the most feminine, the being space is the knowing thyself space, right? It is the, whether you're male or female, it's the knowing thyself. How do you really feel about something? And how that affects even your identity, right? If we're people pleasing all the time, then cultivating that knowing space is going to be difficult. And I see it rampant in our culture. We're constantly people pleasing. Will you love me now? Will you love me now? Because we're so programmed to get love outside of ourselves. And the definition of love itself ingrained in our culture is partly obedience, partly agreement. So if you love me, you'll just give me what I need, or you'll just agree with me. This is my perspective. So partly this is just what I'm going through and learning, right? But I do want you to think about those things. I mean, if you are me and I am you, I would want all parts of myself to question that reality, right? Question whether or not you're really being true to yourself. Growing up in this era, I grew up not thinking that many people knew how to love. Not really. It was always about power and control, getting people to do what it is that they wanted them to do, in energetic manipulation for sure. And I still see it everywhere, not even recognizing that it's happening, not even recognizing that they're lying to themselves or not even aware of parts of themselves. This masculine domination that exists within me, it's so ingrained that it's like subtle things. Like, one, it's really hard for me to be in the being space. I think that it's less than. I think that it has less value to sit and cultivate knowing within myself. And I know that that's not true. I have that awareness, but as I'm moving through it, it really feels like it's so ingrained, right? So it's like it's not worth my time. I really just would rather be doing something. So I would create lists and do all these things. And I see everybody doing business that way, right? And there is a time and a space for that. It's this internal dialogue, but energy. It's like my energy just wants to go out and not necessarily come in. And it's something that we have to cultivate because the energy system is so broken or imbalanced. So it's so used to going out that we have to actively and through our awareness and consciousness bring it back in. And because I'm partly holding this lesson that we are all holding on the planet, we all are part of holding this system, but I'm experiencing it on this side, coming from hating the female to embracing it. It's been a very beautiful journey, and I feel like it's rampant in our culture. Women hate other women. You know how many women I know there's like, I'm not friends with women. They're like, whatever. I hear that a lot. And that's not everybody. But I want you to think about even the dialogue. We're all kind of built to not support the feminine within us. And it's an energy, right? We've limited down to a gender, but what is the feminine, right? What is the feminine? What is it about females that would make us think that, one, they're weaker, right? And two, um, like, just even that idea alone, you can tell there's such a huge misconception or a huge misunderstanding. And because we haven't truly thought about it and wanting to cultivate it and like what it is, and some people are and they're owning it and they're really exploring it. It's like, what is it? Is it because we know ourselves? Is it this act of the unknown? Is it the unknown space? So it's powerful and we don't understand it, so we just want to destroy it? There's a wildness, there's a nurturing, there's so much here that I feel like as we really begin to understand what this feminine is, I feel like there's so many other levels and dimensions that are occurring, like not dimensions, like there's just experiences that we can't even comprehend. It's not in a thinking space, and it's definitely not in the doing space. And so that's the huge shift that's happening on the planet, right? The South is becoming the North. Like that is a premonition, or not a premonition, but it is definitely what's happening. It's part of what I've seen is the South is coming to the North, which means the Southern Hemisphere is coming to the Northern Hemisphere. Everything is coming back into balance. Hence why the poles are starting to shift. It's time for us to remember this ancient wisdom of what femininity truly is, a connection to divinity in a whole new way. Not a whole new way, but new to us. It's like an awakening for us. And I can feel it. It's a whole new way of living. It's trusting our intuition and following our own internal guidance on a daily basis. It's moving out of shoulds and the to-do lists to what is really right. It's integrating spirit into your everyday life. This is the feminine. This is the knowing of the self. And the knowing of the self, no matter what your gender is the integration of spirit into your expression. So that's basically it in a nutshell. My struggles of noticing the domination of my own thoughts, of what I am subtly thinking as weaker or not weaker, or even my relationship to vulnerability or emotions. When somebody's having a hard time, do you think it's weaker? Do you think that you have a hierarchy of when they're going through something? Or somebody that is in a leadership position, if they actually had a human experience of jealousy or anger or sadness or depression, would you think less of them? That's part of this hierarchy, masculine. And I say masculine because it's like right or wrong, right? We are so in our head. So maybe masculine's not even the right word, because I don't think feminine's better than masculine either, right? So we have to be careful both ways. There are some that are truly understanding what masculine energy is in a beautiful way. It's like stepping away from judging it all, and then not judging the judger when it happens, because it's part of our own experience and where we're at. And I don't mean judgment as discernment. We all need to discern what aligns with us or not, what we like and what we don't like. So overall, I really just want to encourage everyone to kind of think about those things where we might have our own biases and judgments, and where we're being vulnerable and where we're allowing ourselves to be seen, like truly being seen, like letting people know how we feel about something and letting other people have their own experience. Meaning, if they don't agree with you, that's okay. That doesn't mean rejection or denial of something of yours. There's so much to talk about, truly. The hierarchy, the systems that we play within. But today, I was just noticing how there's a ghost, right? There's a ghost within me still that wants to dominate and stop myself from fully coming into balance with the feminine. And it made me think that maybe some others were too. So I think Creating art sometimes is silly. Anything feminine, and I didn't even realize it, right? I didn't even realize that I was judging my feminine acts. And when I say feminine, I they feel feminine to me. I see them as weaker. It's not science or math, right? It's this creative energy and it's silly and frivolous and whimsical. Not recognizing the power behind being whimsical, by being creative. And though that's wrapped up into some of the environment I grew up in, because it was such a male dominated environment, I see it as a reflection of that. So that's part of my journey too. This, I'm not speaking about truths. I'm speaking about my truth. And maybe some of you can relate. So I choose moving forward to honor my beautiful, emotional, creative, whimsical, nonsensical, wild energy. The space where things don't make sense and I can be me wherever that might take me. And it doesn't make sense to most, and that's okay. I want to have fun and play and be joyful and live in another world, live in my own world, my own made up world in my head. And it doesn't have to make sense. I don't have to feel like an adult. I don't have to um, limit myself or my expression of who I am. And my guides just told me that lots of people can relate to this. And it truly is about balancing the feminine and the masculine on the planet. And as we shift to a more heart centered existence, and we start really owning our emotional beings. And when I say owning, I mean loving our emotions and all of their grandeur, from sadness to happiness, all of them. When we get this machine kind of going, where we can actually function and flow, so many things will happen because we'll start recognizing who we really are. And that's what this is all about. It's like really allowing all of us to be who we really are, right? Because once you actually recognize, you can start cultivating what you're really here to do. And that's what this was about for me. It's like really letting me paint and be weird and different and bring in messages, and I'm sorry, I can talk to the trees, I can talk to people that have passed over, I can talk to so many different beings in so many different dimensions. I'm sorry, not sorry. So part of this is an act of power, and it needs to be seen. Like your act of power needs to be seen. Your messiness and imperfection needs to be seen, because there's so much power in that. And that is the power of the feminine. Rawness, authenticity. You, however you are today, showing up. So, just like normal, I was told to start talking about it and see what comes out. And I really hope you enjoyed the conversation at least. And I hope that it it sparked something in you, and it made you think about some of these biases that we have within ourselves, outside of us, even within our culture. And it just starts with us. It's simple. You don't have to go fight a civil war. No more fighting. As we create balance within ourselves, it's going to naturally happen outside of ourselves because more and more people will find balance, right? What is it? 51 monkeys. The 51st monkey is the one that changes the culture, like in a family of monkeys. I think it's 55, or I forget the number. Well, be one of the 51s. The 51st monkey, right? Help shift the planet. Allow yourself, love yourself, and be crazy and wild and weird. All right, until next time, namaste.